Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a corner of World War I that, it often gets overlooked, the Macedonian front.
hmm
And we're zooming in on this one really brutal clash from May 1918, the Battle of Skra. It wasn't a massive battle like on the Western Front, but for Greece, this moment was absolutely everything.
It really was. You could say it was a pivotal moment that didn't just win a piece of ground, but it helped resolve a national crisis, and maybe surprisingly, it sped up the collapse of that whole theater of war.
That's the mission for this deep dive, right? To see this battle as more than just a military win.
Exactly. We're analyzing it as a kind of ultimate stress test. It was the big exam for the new Greek army, this National Defense Army Corps, that had been, well, pretty hastily put together by Atherios Venizelos' government.
And the whole world, or at least the Allied High Command, was watching.
They were. They needed to see with their own eyes that these new Greek soldiers were capable and, actually willing to go on the offensive.
Okay, let's unpack this. What were the stakes for Greece leading up to this point? Because this was about so much more than just pushing back the Bulgarians. It was about legitimacy.
The stakes were, well, they were astronomical. Greece was a nation at war with itself, stuck in this chaotic period called the National Schism.
Right, from about 1915 onwards.
Exactly. And it was a deep, paralyzing split. On one side, you had the royalists, who were with King Constantine, pushing for neutrality, which, kind of leaned towards Germany.
And on the other?
The other side was the liberal nationalists,
Yeah.
led by Venizelos. And they were demanding Greece jump into the war on the side of the Allies, the Entente.
And this wasn't just a debate in Parliament. It was a literal split in the country.
Oh, absolutely. By 1916, Venizelos sets up a whole provisional government in Thessaloniki. So you've got this rival government to the kings in Athens,
Two Greek states, essentially. Two capitals, two armies.
pretty much. So when Venizelos needed to raise his own army to fight with the Allies, he was building a force in direct opposition to the official royal government. This army, the National Defense Army Corps, was his ticket to international legitimacy. If they couldn't fight, his whole project was, frankly, meaningless to the Allies.
So where did he get the soldiers? I mean, raising three divisions, the Archipelago, Crete, and Sarah's divisions, when the country is split in two, must have been a logistical nightmare.
It was a monumental effort. They were basically building a modern army from nothing. The sources are really clear on the problems they had. A desperate shortage of qualified NCOs, not enough modern weapons.
So how do you lead men without sergeants?
You have to create them. They had to set up brand new training centers just to get NCOs into the ranks. But they had one huge advantage. The troops were politically motivated. The men were mostly drawn from the new lands, the Aegean Islands, Crete, Macedonia. And in those places, support for Venizelos and the idea of a greater Greece was overwhelming.
That makes sense. So they weren't just fighting for a king they might not support. They were fighting for a specific political vision of their country.
Exactly. Politically motivated recruits. So after King Constantine finally abdicated in June 1917 under a lot of Allied pressure, I should add, Venizelos takes over the whole country and officially joins the war.
But the Allies were still wary.
Very wary. They'd been burned before. Just declaring war wasn't enough. They needed to be sure this new Greek army, cobbled together so fast and with all this political baggage, was a reliable, sharp weapon.
And Skra was going to be the test.
It was chosen specifically to provide that proof.
So if this was the test, tell me about the objective. What was Skra? Why was it such a perfect and therefore difficult target?
Skra. The name itself means cradle of rocks in a local dialect. That tells you a lot. Geographically, it was a horror show for any attacker. It wasn't just a hill, it was this rocky salient, a bulge sticking out into the Allied lines west of the Vardar River.
And the Bulgarians holding it were, by this point, veterans of trench warfare.
Masters of it. The Bulgarian 5th Division had been digging in there for years. The position was considered, basically impregnable. They used the natural rock to build these just formidable defenses.
We're not talking about simple ditches here.
Not at all. We're talking two complete lines of defense, a labyrinth of trenches is what
Right.
the sources call them. Deep, reinforced, with machine gun nests hidden in concrete or blasted out of the rock itself.
Then the approach.
A killing field. Shielded by double or triple rows of thick barbed wire. So to attack, you had to cross open ground, get through that wire, breach two trench lines, all while facing machine guns and hardened bunkers. It was a nightmare scenario.
And what makes this even more dramatic is that the Allies had already tried and failed to take this exact spot.
Right. The French 122nd Division tried in 1917 and failed spectacularly. That failure just hung over the entire sector.
So General Guillemot, the Allied commander, knew what he was asking.
He knew. And he knew that if the Greeks could succeed where the French had failed, well, that would be a powerful statement. It set an incredibly high bar for these untested Greek troops.
So given those defenses, how did Guillemot plan the attack? Was he trying to minimize the risk, or was it a trial by fire?
Oh, it was a trial by fire. He canned it very deliberately as a proving ground. His stated goal was, and I'm paraphrasing here, to test the quality of the Greek troops and the resolve of the Bulgarian enemy.
No ambiguity there.
None. The plan put the Greek units front and center. They weren't in a supporting role. They were leading the charge. The main force was the Greek Archipelago Division, the 5th and 6th Regiments, with support from the 1st Sarah's Regiment. That's over 14,000 infantrymen going up against a fortress.
But not alone, I hope.
Thankfully, no. The Allies provided absolutely crushing artillery support. We're talking about 287 guns heavy, medium, light, British 8-inch howitzers, 60-pounders. They were going to pulverize those defenses as much as possible.
Yeah.
That kind of firepower shows the high command couldn't afford another failure. So let's get to the assault itself. May 30th, 1918, just before 5 a.m. What was the key to their success?
Synchronization. Absolute perfect synchronization. The sources all highlight the great skill and discipline of the Greek soldiers, especially how they used the creeping barrage.
For anyone not familiar, that means the artillery is landing just ahead of your own advancing troops.
Exactly. The shells advance in carefully timed jumps, maybe 100 yards every few minutes.
And that requires an insane amount of courage. You lag behind, the defenders come out of their bunkers, you go too fast.
You walk right into your own artillery fire. It's a high-risk, high-reward tactic. And the Greek troops, they proved they could do it. They stayed right on the heels of the explosions.
Which means the Bulgarians never had time to get their machine guns properly manned?
No time at all. They just overran the forward positions. The speed of the whole thing was shocking.
How fast are we talking?
They took the main objectives, Skra and the nearby Pitten Danud, in about an hour and a half. By 6:15 a.m., the Archipelago Division's main job was done. That speed just sent a shockwave up and down the front.
A shock to both sides, I imagine.
A huge shock. Allied command was stunned by the professionalism. The Bulgarians were completely demoralized. And you hear these stories, like about a Sergeant Kostas Klimatsakis, leading these small, almost suicidal attacks on key outposts before the main assault. It shows you the kind of ferocity and personal initiative at play.
But that kind of success, especially against a position where the French had failed, must have come at a terrible price.
It did. We have to pause on that, on the human cost. The losses were incredibly heavy, especially for the Archipelago Division, the spearhead unit.
What are the numbers?
For that division alone, 338 dead, 1,777 wounded, and 164 missing. That's nearly 2,300 casualties. The total Allied dead was 441.
So the Archipelago Division took the vast majority of the fatal casualties.
They did. It shows you exactly where the fighting was hottest, and it went right to the top. A Major Vasileios Papagiannis, a battalion commander in that division, was the highest-ranking Greek officer killed.
And on the Bulgarian side?
They were hit hard. Roughly 600 killed, and somewhere around 2,000 to 2,300 taken prisoner. A huge blow.
So, despite the cost, the immediate reaction from the Allies was what?
It was glowing praise, unequivocally positive. General Guillemot and later Franche Desprez, who was famously photographed decorating the 5th Archipelago Regiment's flag, he described the Greek infantry's performance as showing unparalleled bravery and exceptional impetuosity.
Taking a position where a veteran French division had failed, that had to be seen as a huge accomplishment.
It was. It went way beyond just a local tactical win.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What did this single battle actually change in the big picture of the war?
The leverage it created was immense. It worked on so many levels at once. First, internationally. The victory immediately solidified Venizelos' political credibility with the Allies. He had delivered. He had proven his government could field a real offensive army.
It opened the door for Greece to have a bigger seat at the table.
A much bigger seat. Then you have the domestic angle. For a country that was just tearing itself apart, this was a massive morale boost. A moment of shared national pride that, it helped paper over some of those bitter divisions.
And for the Bulgarians?
It was devastating. It totally demoralized the Bulgarian soldiers, and it showed the Allied command that there was a serious weakness in what they thought was an unbreakable front.
So this was the catalyst. This was the moment that convinced them a final offensive could actually work.
Absolutely. The success at Skra gave the Allied commanders the confidence they needed to greenlight a major offensive. Greek military historians later called it the beginning of everything, Tin Ashin Tupans, the essential first step toward the Big Vardar offensive in September.
And in that September offensive, the Greek role was significant.
It was huge. When that offensive kicked off, Greek forces made up 34% of the entire Allied effort. Their proven capability led directly to the breakthrough that knocked Bulgaria out of the war, then the Ottoman Empire, and it just accelerated the whole collapse of the Central Powers in the South.
So the main takeaway here is that the Battle of Skradalitin was so much more than a skirmish. It was a politically charged military test that validated a government, restored a nation's pride, and genuinely helped end the war in the Balkans.
It was a tactical victory with grand strategic consequences. And if you want one final piece of evidence of how political it was, just look at what happened to the Archipelago Division after the war.
What happened?
When the Royalists won the elections in 1920, they immediately renamed it, changed it to the 7th Infantry Division. They literally tried to erase the Venizelist connection from the name of the very unit that won this great victory. It just goes to show how politics and identity were baked into the army itself.
So the question for you to think about is this. How many other military victories that look like purely tactical events on a map are really about something else? Are they political acts of foundation, a way for one side to legitimize its very existence?
It makes you wonder how often the real prize isn't the hill you capture, but the political capital you earn by taking it.
Something for you to mull over as you think about how military success can dictate national fate?